life is wonderful on the other side of mental and behavioral health if you can find your path to get there. So obviously, I'm highly motivated to help other people because it's awful. It's an awful malady to feel that way about yourself, be shackled to something that, is taking control of your life and your relationships and your finances and your living situation, and you allow it.
All right, welcome to The Boost, conversations with people promoting mental health. And I'm really delighted to be here with Kathy Gaughran, the senior marketing strategist from Healthcare Success. Kathy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. It's been fun to talk with you in the green room and the pre-chat. We have a lot in common. We both have spent some time in Southern California, and we were just off to the races in the chat. So it's good to hit record and talk with you here for the podcast.
Good. Yeah, so a few of the things that do you want me to just jump in?
Yeah, do it.
Okay. A few of the things that we were talking about, we've seen some really significant shifts in the mental health space. As we talked about at the beginning, I work for a full service healthcare ad agency called Healthcare Success, and we're going to be speaking at the conference coming up. We're looking forward to that. We have worked in the SUD space, mental health, behavioral health, for a couple of decades. And I also mentioned I've been in the recovery space on both sides of the fence for decades, which gives me a really wonderful perspective into the user's journey. We call it user in the agency world, people who are pursuing a solution to a problem, and it's a sensitive journey. We were also discussing the importance and the value of the influencers that are often involved in that journey. When people are struggling with mental health, sometimes it can be difficult for them to get to a decision to admit into a residential facility or get the help that they need. Often it takes the loved ones around them to finally have that final push to get them into good quality care. So I feel very grateful being in the space that I'm in to be able to share my story to help people fight the shame associated with mental health. And I'm so grateful. You and I were talking about that earlier. I really think that's a silver lining, if I can say that, coming out of COVID, is just an awareness of the struggle and the magnitude that mental health has on, people in the U.S. and across the world. But in the U.S. in particular, I was doing some studies. I also suffer with a bipolar diagnosis, which is also, tough. Many of us do. Many people in recovery have a dual diagnosis. I'd say maybe all. Alcohol tends to be, or drugs tend to be, a Band-Aid for a larger problem. So you can remove that substance, but you're still stuck with the problem. So it's important that you treat the whole person and not just the addiction itself. I learned that the hard way. So it's really critical to be able to treat that whole person. And then the shame issue, we've got a meeting right around the corner from my house, and it's across the street from the high school that my kids went to school at. Also, my husband and I went to school there. So there is shame associated with the cars parked outside of that meeting. Now, it should be a positive, because usually if your car ends up parked at that meeting, people are aware that you've been struggling. So it just, it's frustrating that we still have to deal with shame associated with mental and behavioral health that we do. But I think there's a lot of people out there fighting the good fight and writing great content. I have a lot of colleagues who write content on shame associated with addiction, because it's what keeps a lot of people from getting clean and sober, is just the having to get visible and address the issue so that you can walk through the solution.
Yeah. Loneliness is
isolation,
powerful, and it's not good for any of us.
No.
Certainly certain people are wired to thrive more in, solo careers, solo sports, solo things, but the impact of stigma on isolating somebody, outside of a circle of supporters is it's just dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things. It's easy to say, well, we want to fight against stigma. Well, what does that mean? It means we have an opportunity and maybe a responsibility to care for the people around us instead of shaming them if they're happening to be at a group meeting where they're trying to get care or trying to, be vocal about what they're going through and find support.
Well, and working on making yourself healthier should never be associated with shame. It just doesn't make any sense. It's what's best for your health, it's what's best for your family. Our sufferers are not in tune with their families, they're often MIA. Not to mention it will eventually take your life. Hospitals, institutions, and death is what the outcome is for substance abuse users or substance abusers. I had a dear friend, and it's also the power of the disease, whether it's mental health or behavioral or SUD. I had a very dear friend, educated woman, lived a great life. She was a rescue skier. She traveled all over the world. She sang opera, and she had had open heart surgery due to her excessive drinking. And they had told her, if you drink again, it's going to take your life. And it did. So and I've lost a lot of friends to this disease. And one of the things that stuck with me, and this comes back to what I do for a living, is being able to reach these people and get them the help that they need in a way that makes them feel connected. So when they found her, she'd passed away in her bed, sitting up with her glasses in her hand and her laptop open to Facebook. So she's in there, and that's the thing that I get to do in my professional career, is find the people who are searching for solutions and just be ever present, right place, right time, and right message, to where they feel like we're connecting with them and can actually provide solution. Another problem is the recidivism in behavioral and SUD. A lot of people who've been to residential treatment programs have been multiple times, myself included. So what's different about this time? What's going to be unique about this next month that I decide to commit? So it's also really important to identify what has or has not worked in the past and try to leverage that, going back to some of the principles of AA, that's worked for hundreds of thousands of people over the years, but still so much shame associated with a lot of that programming. So yeah, I like to be able to have the opportunity to work against that and stand up against it. And it takes people like us that are sufferers. I have the brand of being in recovery, and I'm not ashamed of it. So I just hope that infects more people, and more people are willing to stand up for that. But there are job issues. People run the risk of losing their jobs if they come out with their malady or their challenge. So I understand that. My life is different than everybody else's, so I'm not any better or worse for being visible. It's just how I've chosen to live my life. But I understand there are dire consequences for people for coming out with mental or SUD conditions.
Sure. Yeah. Follow the money, follow the
Yeah,
incentives.
exactly.
Who doesn't have a story? Unfortunately, I had a very, very, very close friend, and just a salt of the earth kind of guy. I mean, shirt off his back kind of person, doing amazing things. A surgery, some back issues, opioids get involved, change the wiring in his brain is how I could best understand it as just a novice. And this was years ago. And then he sought other substances, just as a way to cope. And and he died. He's my age, and this happened a while ago. So, but you are a powerful force for this fight, and you're very open about your story.
Yes.
You're 20 years clean, 20 years sober. Why have you made the choice to be so open about your story?
Well, and to give you the specifics, I've been in program for close to 30 years. I have 10 straight clean and sober, but I've got a lot of years in sobriety. So because each time I would relapse, I was a relapser. I'm determined, and it's really hard to think that something is stronger than I am, that I can't control it. So I had a real tough time with that. But I have the opportunity, it's just how I see it, to help other people like me. And I remember a woman speaking when I was in a facility. I am participating in hospitals and institutions. It's a panel that goes out and speaks in hospitals and institutions to people who can't get out, that are suffering from mental and behavioral health issues. And the prisons are also, I get as much out of it as I hope they do. But there was a woman who came in and it changed my life. And it wasn't for her better. She lost custody of her children and never got that back. So I was just bound and determined to not take that path. So she doesn't know that she touched me, and probably never will. But I want to be able to try to provide a path or a vision to other women in particular, to live the life that they can. My life is my best life. I would not trade it for anything. I've skinned my knees along the way and have had some relapses, and I've had consequences around that. But I am the person I am today as a result of that. And I feel very, very grateful and fortunate for that. So life is wonderful on the other side of mental and behavioral health, if you can find your path to get there. So obviously, I'm highly motivated to help other people, because it's awful. It's an awful malady to feel that way about yourself, be shackled to something that, is taking control of your life and your relationships and your finances and your living situation, and you allow it, and it's hard to think that you're strong and that you understand what's right and what's wrong, but you still are letting this warrior, seep into your life and take over. So it's an honor, honestly, to be able to help other people. And I'm grateful to be able to do that.
And so here you are at Healthcare Success, an organization that's helping mental and behavioral health organizations in Ohio and Southern California. Talk a little bit more about what they do well, what they do best. Like, for people who don't know Healthcare Success, which I've known about the brand for a long time, and Stuart's been a voice and an expert in the field of healthcare marketing and behavioral health marketing for a long time. So talk about what you all do.
Thank you for asking that too. Love to. So Stuart and I, we have an interesting story. He and I worked at a previous healthcare ad agency together called Practice Builders, which I'm not sure if they're still, it was pre-internet decades ago, but we've worked together for close to 32 years. So we have been, our entire adult career working side by side. And that's been a blast because we think similarly. He leans into the tech side and I leaned into the human side, patient experience. And so we complement each other nicely that way strategically. But we have recruited a phenomenal team that just happens to have a lot of experience and exposure in the behavioral health side. So I will typically work with a group of practices, group of centers, and identify, their low-hanging fruit, what their challenges are, their unique value proposition, how well they're standing out in the markets that they're in, what the gap is between them and their competition. So how well they're being represented to reach the people they want to serve in the markets they're in. And then we work with paid search analytics. We take a look at the website, content, SEO, traditional. So we really look across the spectrum at the entire user journey. Because everything isn't a nail, so it's important to look at the diversity. It's how do they first become aware of the brand, and then how do they have access to the brand? What does that connection feel like and look like, and how well does this brand understand me? How readily can I get scheduled, and what does that feel like? Do they accept my insurance? So there's a lot that goes on before that first phone call, or as that first phone call is happening. So it's just critical that they feel the brand's commitment to their well-being through that process. And a lot of that is through the vibe and the culture of the organization, how they represent themselves, what they stand for, how quickly they respond, how they treat me on the phone, vocal intonation, those types of things. So we've actually built out taking it all the way through to reviews, because it's difficult to get a review with someone that's just been released from a rehab facility or a mental treatment facility, similar to fertility, right? So if I finally got pregnant, I had my baby, I don't care about reviewing my reproductive endocrinologist. I just want to play with my baby. Exactly. So we've built out letters that would appeal to me. And the 80-20 principle applies here. Only 20% of the people are even going to talk about it. And I get that, but I happen to be one of those 20%. So leverage your Kathys, make sure that they're out there as your alumni, your ambassadors, because they're going to carry your story far more effectively, than anything online could. But so you also look at splitting out your opportunities for new patients into a 30-30-30 profile, if you will. It will never look like that, but you want to shoot for it. 30% of your new patients coming from professional referrals, physicians, counselors, other people in the space you have relationships with. 30% coming from patient to patient referrals. Um, Women in particular will talk. And when I hike, that's one of my therapy sessions, is I hike the canyon up here behind my house. And I was hiking with a friend the other day, and she was looking for a therapist for her daughter, her adult daughter. And the only thing she was looking at were the stars. That was it. She wasn't reading much. She was looking at the location and the number of stars. So we all make decisions very differently. Is that how we should be making decisions? We know that those stars can be manipulated, but in our heart, we feel it's a true testimony to the experience that either that family member had, that influencer, or the individual themselves. So we want to make sure all of that is shored up. So you're not thinking about little bits and pieces of that journey, but just the user's journey being as pure as it can so that they can get the help that they need. So it's
Yeah.
clearing out all that clutter.
Yeah, and that patient to patient referral, that is huge. I mean, that's
Huge.
that's the modern day word of mouth. Some of it does happen online,
Mm-hmm.
and we have these little rubrics and these little rules of thumb for making quick decisions, in a very busy, hectic world sometimes. So, sometimes I will rely on the stars, and I'll believe 4.5 stars more than I will believe 5 stars,
I do.
but I definitely will avoid 2 stars,
Yep. Yep.
and it's like that simple.
Well, and
But
Amazon is conditioning us to do that, right? So I was looking at two identical products. I bought a ridiculous product yesterday. They say cats mirror their owners, and I'm a very new cat owner. I've had dogs my whole life. So I'm always on my computer. My cats always want to get on my computer, so they have a little mini Apple laptop. And they had four of them. They had one for $5.99, $7.99, $3.99, $12.99. I bought based on the stars, not the pricing, because I didn't want to have it fall apart. So there's perceived value that is associated with price points, and there's perceived value obviously associated with the reviews. So those things are just critical to make sure that you're competitive, because your consumers are going to shape their perception based on things they're exposed to. People shape their perception based on what they can see, because if they can't see things, then they're going to decide how good you are based on what they can see. Does that make sense?
yeah,
People
totally.
evaluate what they can't see based on what they can see. That's a better way of putting it.
Yeah, it's part of the challenge about mental health is that, physical health is most of the time obvious,
Mm-hmm.
to ourselves. I can tell that I have a cold, or I
Right.
can tell that my leg hurts. Well, there's a cut there. I should
Mm-hmm.
probably get that sewn up. It's so much harder for us to look at the invisible and say, I think I'm really going through maybe a health concern here,
Right.
when everything looks great, it's like I smile at myself in the mirror and, well, all must be well. Well,
Yeah.
no, we've seen the Anthony Bourdains and the Robin Williams and the people who entertain and delight us and make us laugh or what have you.
But
And
hurt
there's
inside.
something very else going on,
Yeah.
and you can't just tell by the cover of the book. But here we are thinking, oh, well, if we just, I don't know.
Well, and
It's
who did a fantastic job, I think, at shifting that message and right before our eyes is Simone Biles. We were watching that, watching the Olympics all week, and she said that very thing. She said, if my leg was broken, if there was a bone sticking out of my leg, nobody would question me pulling myself out. But my brain was broken. I could feel it and nobody could see it. So I got criticized for it. So it's, and I don't want to mention this on this podcast unless it makes its way back, but one of my family members was struggling. She was 5150 and had been suicidal and was just having a really difficult time. And her mother bought her a cookbook and said she just needed to lose weight. That was the solution. So that, I think, is a big part of the problem, is just the people that are closest to our sufferers don't get it. They don't understand it, and it was hard for me to explain to my family what I was going through. They'd say, well, just don't drink. Well, if it was that easy, I would do that. I would follow that directive, but it's not that easy. So it's difficult to explain mental health and addiction to people who just haven't experienced it. So I like
Yeah.
to be able to provide experience and my strength and hope, because I've had a good journey. I just took a birthday, and my sponsor, I said, I don't like taking birthdays because of my relapsing. And it's like, oh, that's only your date, but you've been, you've been coming for 20 years. You only have 10 years. I'm like, oh yeah. But so she said, it's not about you. It's about you providing hope about what the program did for you.
Mm.
So it's not about, nobody cares about you. People care about seeing what the program and what success you've been able to achieve through a rigorous program. So it's making sure that we're selfless and that we're able to really give back to people who need us. So
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned Simone Biles. She's been a force. She's a
oh,
goat for
absolutely,
sure.
he's a
Um,
ghost.
but what we noticed, or what I can say, what I noticed, we went through collectively, as this kind of global consciousness, watching Simone Biles go through that a couple years ago, a few years ago, was, oh, she's like, she's throwing away, she's just like weak. She's throwing away some of the best parts of her career. What a shame for somebody in their prime, to come out with some kind of mental health challenge or mental illness or some kind of struggle. And it's like, well, look who's back for the third Olympics. Like,
Yes.
if you can't say that our mental strength is most of the thing that drives us when possible. Not to say that there aren't insurmountable challenges for some of us. I mean, I say this all the time. We spin a big wheel, and sometimes the wheel lands on 5-year-old cancer. And it's like, wow, that didn't land there for me.
Yeah.
Um, and so there are things that are visible and invisible that we go through. Like you said, you're like, I cannot overcome this thing, and I'm a very tough, gritty person. So it's not just more grit,
It's
but
not.
there are opportunities for us to, if and when that's the case, to say, I have this challenge. What's the other option except put it on the dark side of the moon and
Mhm.
hope it never rotates, so
So
we have to.
we try,
Yeah.
yeah, to punch through. So that in putting myself in the closet, if you will, or on the bed with my laptop and isolated from everybody, what is going to get through to me? What's going to resonate with me so that I will reach my hand out and accept that help? And that's what I love to be able to spend my time on, is really understanding that connection. And what is it about this particular brand that our agency is representing that would make me want to connect? Because a lot of SUD specifically is bed availability, right? You need a bed now. So often, and I've been in that position and I've seen that, where you're
Yeah.
calling around looking at beds, and that really shouldn't be how you choose a facility. There's a lot that happens inside these facilities that differs from group to group, and that's what we really try to highlight. We also have a rock star on our paid search team. His name's Josh Weam. And Josh worked for Google as their podium guy for about 6 years, I think it was. He was speaking on Legit Script when Legit Script rolled out. And he said he felt like he was the Grim Reaper. People wanted to kill him, because it's this new, and who knows where it came from. I still can't quite put my finger on the origination of that, but it's guiding all that we do. Everybody's got to play that game. So he is a rock star in paid search for addiction and behavioral health. It's amazing to see. We were at the TCIV conferences, which is a private equity conference for behavioral health groups, and quite a few people at the event recognized him because he was with another agency before us. But he's worked with some really big brands. We have some big brands in house right now that have hundreds of beds, multiple locations, and then we have some that are just more granular. IOP is a little bit harder to drive traffic to than residential. And then you look at areas that are very rural. We tried driving traffic to Kalispell, Wyoming, and it's just really understanding the nature of the market, and the acceptance of mental health in that particular market. Obviously, liberal markets are a little bit more forgiving and more open armed than a little bit more conservative markets, but I think we're breaking through that. But with Josh's targeting and strategy, my front end strategy and understanding the nature of the business, our content writers are just fabulous. We've just got a phenomenal team. And then one of our brand specialists also comes to us from a mental health background with the agency he worked with previously. So we've got a lot in our lineup that really helps, because behavioral health marketing is very different than marketing for orthopedics or for fertility or for OB-GYN. It's a much higher level of sensitivity because private equity has gotten their arms around a lot of these high profit treatment facilities, residential treatment facilities. The competition has gone through the roof because there's a lot of budget to support some bigger active campaigns. So it's just a completely different playing field. I do love we have greater acceptance, but it's just a bigger fight because there's more players, more money, and more people to treat.
All right, Kathy, I would love to keep talking with you. I'm going to wrap up the podcast. Thank you so much for being on. You are a wealth of information and insight. I can't wait to have you speak into this more at the Mental Health Marketing Conference. We actually had Josh at the 2019 conference on. He is a total expert, and it's awesome that he's on your team. But thank you for coming on. Thank you for supporting the conference, and can't wait to see you in October.
Thank you for having me.